I go to Mr. Giovanni for the Conservatives. 5 minutes, please, Mr. Giovanni.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tate, I just want to clarify a couple of things that I heard today. So first, did you say that you were on a personal trip to France, decided to extend your vacation, go to the Olympics, and then bill the taxpayer for it? Is that correct?
I was on a personal trip to France, and I did not bill the taxpayer for my flight or travel from Canada.
What did you bill the taxpayer for?
The hotel and the train to get to Paris.
Where does your personal trip end and your
The day I
taxpayer billing begin?
when I, as part of my job, being at the opening of the Olympics was absolutely expected of me, so I interrupted my holiday and took the 4 days to go to the Olympics.
Could you understand why that sounds concerning to somebody? Just because, bit of a weird situation where you get to go on a trip, you're having your personal time, and then you just unilaterally get to decide what becomes work and what doesn't?
Well, not if I'm not charging the company for the trip.
But you did charge the taxpayer $6,000.
Correct.
For your
When I
time in
was
Paris.
working in Paris, I did, yes.
But could you understand why it would be concerning?
I would think that it would be concerning that
it
would be concerning if the CEO of CBC Radio-Canada did not attend the opening of the Olympics, given it was one of the most important events of our calendar year.
But when the average Canadian hears that you're charging thousands of dollars to the taxpayer and you are just kind of deciding when your personal time ends and your billable time begins, it gets to sort of a broader concern, and to the point about bonuses that many of our colleagues have made today, of whether you have respect for the taxpayer. Can you see why that would be concerning to the average Canadian?
I do not make those decisions alone. I always check in with my chair, and I behave in a responsible fashion.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to ask if you agree with a statement that's been attributed to you. And I'm going to quote, "The defund narrative has picked up momentum, especially as it relates to CBC television." Did that come from you?
Yes.
Okay. So that was reported last week by the National Post from an email they obtained from you, and I believe in January 2024. Is that correct?
I presume so, yes.
Okay. So when you look at the concerns over your expenses, right, which I think legitimate concerns over where your personal vacation time ends and where your billable time begins, when you see the concerns over news stories related to your bonuses that are going out and bonuses you may receive or executives receive, the $18 million that we've been talking about today, do you think any of that might contribute to what you yourself have observed as a growing movement to defund the CBC?
I absolutely do not.
Why is that?
Because I believe that having experienced now the third appearance at this committee, I would say that there is a clear effort on the part of members of this committee to vilify and to discredit me and to discredit the organization. Not one question has been asked, not one question has been asked about the accomplishments of the public broadcaster over the last 6 years and how we have served
I think our
Canadians.
Liberal colleagues have asked you some of those questions, so I think that's not a fair representation of your time here today. But let's go back to something that our colleague, Mr. Coteau, asked you earlier. You referred to KPIs, key performance indicators. Would the idea that a growing movement in our country would like to defund your organization be weighed into an analysis of key performance indicators and determining whether the discretionary portions of the bonuses that you've acknowledged there is a percentage that is discretionary and not contractually obligated, that those percentages that you might consider, if people don't like what we're doing, if people don't trust us, if people would like the government to take money away from our bloated organization, maybe we shouldn't be spending more of their money than we have to. Could that not cross your mind in analyzing the KPIs?
We do not take into consideration political wins or influences in determining our business metrics.
So you would call it a political reaction for the average Canadian to hear that you're doling out $18 million in bonuses, that you're billing the taxpayer for your time in Paris while on a personal vacation. That's a political concern, that the average Canadian wouldn't have a pure interest in that based purely on the fact that they are giving you their hard-earned money through taxes?
I'm not sure I understand what
30
you're
seconds.
getting at on this question. I'm
30
sorry.
seconds, please.
You're trying to marginalize legitimate concerns about abuse of taxpayer dollars and any accountability that we are trying as parliamentarians to introduce here, and you're saying it's purely political. And what I'm saying is the big, beautiful, growing movement to defund the CBC is not a purely political movement, but it is a matter of taxpayer accountability. Can you not acknowledge that?
I will not, Madam Chair, I will not be accused of abusing taxpayer dollars. I'm sorry, for the record. We have managed our budget extremely carefully. We were facing $100 million.
I don't think the Canadian people would agree with you.
Giovanni, will you allow Ms. to finish your answer? Thank you.
We were facing a $125 million deficit. We managed as carefully as we could, and we respected the obligations we had to over 1,180 employees. I believe Canadians will understand. And by the way, 73% of Canadians still consider us the most trusted source of news. 79% of Canadians say they believe that CBC should be in the future of this country.
Is that reported on by the CBC?
I think
those facts,
gone
that data?
over time, Mr. Giovanni. Okay. Thank you very much. With Monsieur Gourde for the Conservative Party. 5 minutes, please, Monsieur Gourde.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci, Madame Tay, Madame Goblin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tate, Mr. Goodman, Ms. Tate, I'm very pleased to see you here in person. And in fact, you were there in person for the opening of the Olympic Games. I just want to know whether this was during your personal vacation. Yes. Well, the media has indicated that you charged the Canadian taxpayers $1,000 per night for the hotel, as well as other expenses in the order of approximately $6,000. So why charge $6,000 to Canadians if you were there during your personal holiday? I was in France for my personal holiday during the Olympic Games, but during those days I was working for CBC Radio Canada. And if you were to look at all of the newspapers, it was very clear there was no hotel room in Paris that was available at a lower price than that. So this was the official hotel for the Games. I was there with other delegates, and I benefited from all of the services, for example, the shuttle that enabled us to go to the opening of the Games because there were security issues at stake. I understand, but you just indicated that you were on a personal holiday, but then you were no longer on a personal holiday. It's important to have the true version. Well, I was on holiday. That's why I did not ask CBC Radio Canada to pay for my airfare. Nevertheless, when I went to the Games, I was working on behalf of Radio Canada, of course, CBC. So you cut part of your personal holidays there because you were there 2-3 weeks a month. It doesn't matter, but you cut those in half and you charge those prices. I'd like to come back to the bonuses. So the managers at Radio Canada, CBC, those who receive bonuses, have any of them threatened to leave if they did not receive the bonuses? Because the bonuses were taken from a very tight budget. After all, there have been cutbacks, as you've indicated. They had to cut back on production. People lost their jobs. Some jobs were not filled. But these managers were aware that they hurt many people, especially young people who lost their jobs. Are there any among these managers who would have simply agreed to not receive the bonus this year to perhaps allow other employees to retain their jobs? Or did people say, well, if we don't obtain our bonuses, we'll work elsewhere? Well, I can't speak to the actions of other persons. What I can say is that we asked our legal department to review the risks linked to measures that would eliminate the bonuses. And then we understood that, as Mr. Coutu has just indicated, it was an obligation that we had vis-à-vis these some 1,000 employees. But between us and the Canadian public, some might have said, look, we are in a year where we must cut back. We have to be careful with taxpayers' money. CBC Radio Canada had a budget issue, and I believe that all of the managers who were entitled to bonus would have agreed if leadership had told them, look, this year we're not giving you a bonus to save as many jobs as possible, to do as much creative work as possible. No doubt this would have been agreed to by most of the managers. Was there really a group of people absolutely wanted to obtain these bonuses, or was this a decision made by senior management to hand out the bonuses? Well, I have to say that cutting bonuses, as you said, or rather this is the performance pay, does not solve the problem we face regarding the structural deficit at CBC Radio Canada. It doesn't save any jobs because the following year we will be facing the same pressure. So in my mind, it was far more important, and as I've discussed this very carefully with the board of directors, to maintain and to honor our obligations vis-à-vis these employees so that we retain the talent, given all of the difficulties that are coming up. So does this money for the bonuses come from any cutbacks or additional funds? Because know that in subsequent years, there were $40 million additional dollars that were given to Radio Canada. Does this come from government or does this come from the cutbacks? That was due to the restructuring of the organization. We have a great deal of work to do with respect to managing a budget. It is a $1.8 billion budget. This involves many components. Every year, we earmark or we reserve the possibility of having this compensation pay because these are obligations.
Mr. Good, your time is up.